Chicks. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Erika.
I'm Jax.
We're super excited to have you guys join us today. This has been a fun episode that's been in the works. We kind of teased it in the beginning of the season. You just have us two today to talk through some fun scenarios. Fun depending on who you ask. Fun for topic of the conversation today. These are real life scenarios that have happened to some of you out there. We will not be giving too much information.
No company names, no
names, no client names, no company names. And I want to preface that these scenarios, our opinions are Jax and Erika's opinions here on how we would handle situations, on our personal thoughts, on navigating them. It's not 100% the only way to handle these things, right, in a professional manner. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of preface that, but excited to dive in and kind of talk about some of these things. So are you ready, Jax?
I am. I want to add one point just to reiterate a little bit further that this is just a fun episode. We don't want it to come off that we're judging or accusing anybody of wrong handling. It's really just having fun and talking about really strange things that happen in the consulting space. So yeah, I'm ready. Let's do this. It'll be fun.
All right. Okay. So kicking it off. I'm going to set the stage. You are on site. You have traveled to a client meeting.
Okay.
Like you've gone on a plane, right? Like yep. you have gone and you're sitting there and you're professional. You've got your agenda ready that you've communicated to this individual. You're sitting there, you're running through a meeting, and, an hour in, they let you know, hey, Jax, I actually got to step out. I got a haircut I can't miss, and I got somewhere to be tonight. So just hold your horses, wait for me about an hour and a half, and I'll be back. What's going through your head?
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Well, the first thing I'm starting to think about, because I'm usually always in a lead role. So I'm assuming this perspective from a lead of leading this team here. So first thing I think of is like, okay, we only have, as you know, a certain amount of time with the client. It's not a lot of time when you're on site. You need to make it as impactful as you possibly can. And now we've lost an hour and a half, possibly 2 hours of time with the client. So I would immediately go into like trying to figure out and problem solve. Okay, when are you going to come back? Okay, we're stopping here. We're going to pick up here. I would be looking at my team and trying to keep them busy with relevant work. Maybe we need to do some additional research and follow-ups and like looking through some of those controls and some of the audit paperwork to keep us moving forward. And I would do that because as a leader, if you're just like, because first thing I would be shocked, like, wait, I know you're paying us, but we're also traveling in to work with you. But they're the client and they can do that at the end of the day, even if I don't think it's right. So I've got to adjust and make sure that we utilize the time the most effective way. And it could impact the overall audit, but we have to make sure we document that for them. So I would kind of go into fire drill mode, but not hopefully let my team see that, like very calmly, like pivot. You have to pivot. You have to be super, I feel like consulting is such a great field because you have to be super agile. And this is a great example of being really agile. Because it's like shock and awe, like, wait a minute, I flew in to meet you and you didn't think about like moving your haircut appointment to like the week prior, the week after.
And you think about it too, you're like, this isn't like, is it an emergency? Maybe it
exactly.
is. Right? Like maybe
they were booked out for like 4 months is the only time slot she could get.
It's Erika, a celebrity hairdresser. Celebrity hairdresser. We gotta assume, right? But I think like the poker face situation too, it's like, this is something that like is kind of unheard of. Like, how do you hide your expression? You're like, all right, okay. Yep. So when can we expect you back? I want to check in on time. Here's the agenda. Yep. Here's where I want to kick back up. Yep. And I think you bring up an interesting like point. If you're the lead, I think, you got to kind of lead the team and figure out what the direction is. But not having the full context here, like, I don't know, maybe you're the individual by yourself. Maybe you're by yourself. And maybe this is one of the, like, maybe you're a year in, maybe you're a few months in, right? Like, maybe you're more junior and you're sent to do a 1-day on-site where you have very limited time and you don't know what you're supposed to do. So like at that point, it's like maybe call your manager, right? Figure out like, with the client, reset expectations. And I think that's what you got to do. But then you probably need to call somebody and get some advice on like, all right, how would you navigate if you need to get it off your chest, like do that, whatever you need to do so that you're still providing a professional like environment when the client gets back. And to your point, like using your time wisely, like don't just sit there and start scrolling or like distract yourself or playing some music, right, to kill time. Like make the time that you have there like still beneficial. If you can review other documentation, if you can prepare for the next session, like whatever you got to do to just keep yourself running efficiently, I'd say, stick with that.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point. You'll see this in consulting overall is like, even though they hired you, you have to manage their expectations as well. So like you talked about, making sure that you mark where they've gone and you have okay, when you come back, this is our agenda when you come back, but also communicating, because you should know, okay, I expect this amount of time with you. Now I'm going to get this much amount of time, and communicating, hey, totally respect that you need to go to an appointment, just so you know, can we stay after for an hour and a half? Otherwise, this could impact the overall audit and we may be running short on X. And communicating that up front, the expectations are really important because it puts the onus on them versus waiting till the end and being like, oh my gosh, we ran out of time, we didn't get everything done. And then it falls back on you as if you didn't plan correctly. So I think it's important to own that right away with the client and making sure this decision that you decided to do will impact this audit. I just wanted to make sure you were clear on that. We're happy to work around your schedule.
Yeah. No, that's a professional conversation. Like you should feel empowered to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. This one's about you maybe not being 100% on the. So we focused on kind of like the client now. Now we're going to focus on you're traveling somewhere and things happen. You pick up germs on a plane, on the airport, whatever. And, day one, you're good, you're on fire. Day two, maybe, or depending on, whatever day it is, you are not feeling great. And maybe you've got a stomach bug. Maybe lunch didn't sit with you well. You gotta go, right? Like I think this plays out multiple ways, right? Like I was thinking, what if I'm not prepared to run this meeting, right? Yeah. If I'm the lead, I'm feeling really bad for leaving somebody in a position where maybe they're not ready to lead. So I think like for both roles, depending on like what part of the team dynamic you are, I think it's a tough situation to be in. But it's something that happens. I mean, this one's a tough one. I feel like you're going to feel some type of way regardless and be worried you're letting down the client and your team.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of facets to this. So it depends on the maturity of your team. Like you've covered you were talking around that. So I think depending on the maturity of your team depends on, okay, can you be out for a day, sick with food poisoning, for example, or do you have to just suck it up because they aren't at that level they need to be and you are the lead on it. So it all depends on your role and position in there. It is a tough one because at the end of the day, the client is paying for you to come out there. And so the client could easily come back and be like, well, we flew you out here. You were supposed to work and now you're sick. We're not going to pay for your travel. We're not going to pay for that day of work, for example. And they can do that. They can be like, do not charge us those hours. So you're sitting in the hotel room for, 8 hours and you don't get to charge the client for that. And that doesn't reflect great on you. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're sick, and there's nothing, you've got to be able to make sure you have a contingency plan with your team already in advance and be hopeful that you have at least somebody that's semi-senior enough that if you were out sick and they could cover. That's the big thing.
I think that's why preparation is key. Like the lesson to learn here is like over prepare. So regardless of whatever role, like you need to be thinking about what you said, contingency planning. Like if I'm going and I'm supporting somebody, like I'm not just going to sit there and expect like I'm just winging it, right? Like if I'm taking notes for somebody, if I'm grabbing, snippets, whatever, like planning a report, whatever it is, like I want clear roles and responsibilities of like, what do you need from me? What are we going to run through? What can I do to provide value while we're there? And so if, for example, somebody does need to step out for a few hours, like you're ready to continue rolling, and maybe you have to pivot a little bit, right? Maybe you don't feel super comfortable like doing a containerization conversation. Maybe you have to pivot and like tackle something else on the agenda. Like maybe you want to talk about like, I don't know, like the physical security of the space, like, but like still making progress so that the client isn't feeling as much of an impact, right? And like, I know that there's a lot of different ways that this could be handled, but I think it just requires extra preparation. And yeah, I mean, I think if you're, to your point, like if you're sick, you're sick. There's no reason that you should be in there either getting your client sick or like sitting there fanning visibly, sweating and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, that's also just not a super good professional like takeaway experience for the client.
Yeah, preparation, you nailed it, is key. Like when you were like asking the scenario, I'm like, well, I haven't been put in that situation in a long time as far as like not being prepared. Like I was just out sick the other day. Everything I had a trifecta of sickness, and I literally was like, I feel like crap. And I have a couple of senior managers on my team. I make sure that I prepare my team and empower them. I've always been that way. I want to make sure if I get hit by a Matt truck, somebody on my team can take over. And I'm like, do I need to be in this call? Well, it would be nice, but I don't need to be in the call. And so I decided to push it over to one of my senior managers who he was doing the POV with this vendor. I said, hey, the vendor's going to get on for 30 minutes. Please lead the discussion and just kick it off with intros. And I trusted him. That's the other thing, is you've got to prepare them, but then trust them. And so I was able to take the rest of the day off and be sick in bed because I had prepared my team to be able to lead, because I empowered them to do that. So I think that's really, really critical. And then know your team. If you're going to a critical client site that is going to be need a lot of hands-on, you're going to need probably a more senior team to help with that in case something does go wrong. In the military, we always have a PACE plan: primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. And that was so ingrained into us as part of like basic training that I think it's just part of how I live in everything. I'm always prepared, at least down to the contingency and emergency. Like always, I always have a plan B and a C just automatically. And that's part of this process, is of like, if I get sick, who is my next in command basically that can take over and lead that for me? And are they prepared? And they're never going to be 100% prepared. You just have to be confident and trust that they can do it. And you then like
your part. Yeah. You've all done your part.
Yep.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I love that. That's a very transferable like skill to learn, and just like lesson learned, right? Like this happens to you one time. Yeah, you'll learn.
You'll learn. I hope you learn.
You better.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a similar in a situation that I think a lot of our listeners and viewers will be able to relate to. This is the personalities that you get into when in consulting. And I've had some amazing clients. Like I have clients on speed dial I still reach out to and just check on, and I love them dearly. But then I also have clients that I would never want their phone number at all, because they would probably call me in the middle of the night yelling at me, because that was just the type of person that they were. And this is common in consulting. You can get explosive clients who can, what I think are very hateful, very emotional, can say very hurtful things to people. And I know you've dealt with this too. How did you work through that? Because there can be so much emotional impact on that, and it can be really demoralizing because you're afraid of like getting removed from the contract. How did you work through that, dealing with those type of clients?
So this is a tough one, because I think it's harder to navigate when you're in person. So yes, when you're on the phone and you're dealing with clients that maybe are coming off as abrasive, it's easier to kind of talk through like the emotions when you are, sitting at your desk, right? Like you have your water, you're at a comfortable temperature, right? Like you maybe haven't been talking to abrasive clients all day. Hopefully you've had some really amazing, gems sprinkled in throughout the day. So like it kind of breaks up your day, I genuinely believe you have more of the positive experiences than you have like the sour ones. And so if you're on the phone, if you're on a video call, what have you, it's more about like, I'm not going to take this personally. this person may have had a bad day. Maybe they're having really serious pressures at work. Maybe their boss is getting onto them. Maybe there's a lot more there that we don't have context to. And I always want to operate with positive intent. This individual, needs what do they need from me, right? Mm-hmm. They need some support. How can I support them in their role? Can I work to understand some of their challenges so that I can, support and address these situations better? And that's not something you might be able to do overnight, right? But if you have a contract with an individual like this at a client, and you're going to be working together, seek to understand what are their challenges, what's going on in their world, right? Try to break down some of those barriers. And the biggest thing is check the ego at the door. Majority of the time, 99.9% of the time is not about you. It's not about you. And so focus on making sure expectations are clear, making sure that you're over communicating, because that way there's nothing lost on them. There's no room for hey, you didn't check in, we're missing a deadline. No, over communicate. If there's risks to a project plan, if there's a meeting you maybe need to move, or you may not be able to miss, or you're going to be late, just err on the side of over communication and building that trust, because I think trust is completely critical. And I mean, focus on delivering quality work. And then on top of that, go in and focus on getting feedback as well. Check in. How was this deliverable? Do you have any feedback for us? Want to make sure that as we continue to work together, I'm fine tuning to your expectations. Mm-hmm. I do think that it is even tricky to have when it does cross into disrespect, because I think that that's different, right? People can be abrasive in communication. Mm-hmm. And maybe still you're kind of they're having a bad day. But then when it borders into disrespect, especially when it's disrespectful to other team members, and you're on the line, right? And you're either seeing it in person or on the phone. That's when I think I've personally had to have sidebars, right? And I'm not gonna air dirty laundry right in front of an entire room. But that's maybe hey, just I want to understand the concern. I heard that you were, concerned about XYZ, or maybe I felt some frustration in your tone on the call today. Help me understand, because I want to make sure, that we're navigating this in a way that, is meeting the intent of the deliverables or the project plan, whatever. What is our desired goal and outcome? And then also, sometimes you do have to let somebody know that, the way that they're discussing certain things with your team is crossing the line. And I think that that is where you as a lead, if you see something, say something to your team internally, there's no reason to ever be disrespectful back. But I think that's when you regroup internally to try to kind of figure out a plan for best attack and who is the right person to have that conversation. So I'll pause there, see if you have anything else to add, and then I kind of want to talk about what to do if it's in person.
Yeah. So I love everything you were saying. And just to add a thought on that, and I don't think you said it. I was drinking water. I'm did she say it? But I don't think you did. And we were talking about it before we went and hit record and I actually say this in my current job, because I think it is worthy to use throughout anything, not just consulting, but learn how to win and not be right. And it's everything you were talking about, seek to understand versus being understood is such a critical thing in consulting, really in any. I think that's one of the reasons I've become such a really good leader, and you as well, is you are so empathetic and you don't let people walk over you, to the respect thing. But you also don't have to be right. You just want to win. You want to do the best job possible. And you do that by asking questions, realizing that they might be having a bad day. But there is a fine line on disrespect. And I would like to know your thoughts, and going back to because the couple of clients I dealt with were in person who were extremely disrespectful, demoralizing to the team. There was a lot of young people on the team. So many of them, this was maybe their first, maybe their second time in consulting or with dealing with a client, and it was impacting their confidence. And so, they were getting told, even though they knew they were right and they knew the subject, to like basically sit on the back bench, don't even sit at the table, and then they were removed off the contract. So like, how would you deal with that in person when you're dealing with something that's scouring at you and giving you evil glares and doesn't even let you speak in a meeting? It's really demoralizing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to touch on the fact that we are all human beings and we may have an emotional reaction internally. But when you are in a professional work setting, you really have to check how you react to that. Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is you should take a deep breath, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody is raising their voice at you, making personal jabs, if they are questioning your credibility, maybe offended that you are a certain role and they paid X amount of money and they can't believe that you're the one that they have to interact with, right? Yep. Or they're not happy with the way you're running meetings and they want to take over and they kind of want to steamroll and dictate how things are run. There's a lot of different ways these types of disrespectful scenarios can happen. I think taking a deep breath, if you need to count, whatever you need to do. I mean, even if you need to excuse yourself and go to the restroom, however you're feeling, you need to check your internal thermometer, right? Mm-hmm. You need to see how you're feeling, how you're reacting, because in no way should you be matching. This is not the time or place to show on your sleeve how you are feeling about it, right? This is a common collected response. I mean, I have genuinely been in a position where I have said, I think this is a great time to just take a quick break. I'm going to step out, give you a few minutes, and then let's reconvene on, best plan forward and make sure, that we're able to, discuss this a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, that's
Remove
perfect.
yourself from the scenario. Give them some time to also de-escalate. Maybe come to a realization that they were being disrespectful. Because, I mean, I will tell you that that's absolutely happened to me where I have had then a client point of contact apologize for, hey, I realized I was a little off base here, shared that they were frustrated, maybe some of it had to do with the project, maybe some of it was personal life. I don't know. We didn't get into it, but it was, they acknowledged, I said, no worries. We're here to move forward in a professional manner. I appreciate the apology, definitely don't want to condone, that it's like, I don't want to say, hey, just no worries and move on with it. It's like hey, thank you for the apology. Let's move forward on, having a professional engagement. And what does success look like for us? Because to your point, bringing it back and tying it in a bow of let's learn how to win. What is our desired outcome? What are we trying to achieve? Is it a successful progress on the engagement, right? Is it a certain status on something, right? Like, let's both work so that we can mutually win and we don't both have to be right. But let's focus on where we want to end up at the end of the day.
100%. And to your point, I think one of the things to say to yourself, if you are getting attacked by a client, is to remind yourself it's not a you problem, that's a them problem. They're not doing it because they don't like you. It may feel that way. Trust me. It may feel like they are personally attacking your work and all of these things. But to be really frank, it is actually them, and it is usually tied. And now we're getting into therapy here, but I say this to my employees. When somebody lashes out to me, I go, okay, somebody has unresolved trauma. And it's true. It is usually an unresolved trauma on their end. You might be triggering them. You might be reminding them of somebody in their life, and all of these things you learn. But once you realize that it's not you that they're actually mad at, even though it feels that way, it's something internally to them. And sometimes at the end of the day, when you try to communicate to them and say, hey, to your point, Erika, like, I understand that you don't like the way that I run meetings. Would you mind showing me how you would prefer meetings to be run? Or can you run a meeting? I'll watch and I'll do it better. Like, maybe at the end of the day, they don't want you to run meetings. It's okay. Like, and it maybe at the end of the day, rolling off the contract is the answer. But what I've realized is many times you can get them on your side if you just hold space for them and have empathy and ask questions, seek to understand. But if it is toxic, we want to be very clear. If it is toxic, it's just not working for you. I get it. Like there were people on the contract that was like, they were actually going in to work in bawling because of how they were being treated by this woman, this woman wasn't impacting me at all. I was like, but I'm older and I've been through other things in my life, but I recognize, okay, this person doesn't need to be on the contract. It's okay. You're not weak because you can't handle a toxic client is all I'm saying. Like, know your boundaries and it's okay to get rolled off. Yeah.
Perspective, experience. There's just so much that goes into this. I mean, the biggest thing is that you can lead yourself with empathy, emotional intelligence, professionalism at the end of the day. Like, how do you want to, navigate the scenario? Don't meet them where they're at in terms of fire with fire, right? Like, that's never the situation that you want to be in. Take a breather, take a step, and then go and discuss internally. Get some support. I never want to jump into oh man, I can't work with this person. Like, that should not be your default answer go to. Like, you're going to run into maybe some conflicting personalities or maybe challenging conversations. And a lot of times, like, you can work through that. And so I think that, like, giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, taking that confidence back, and to your point, remembering that this is just it's not a personal situation.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Take the personal out of it, even if it feels it. I know it does feel it sometimes because you're like, they're insulting my intelligence, but it is not a you problem. It's a them problem. Just seek to understand, learn to win and not be right. Yeah. So, all right, let's pivot a little bit out of the client explosion. I think we've covered this one too. One we've both have experienced this, but I have experienced it not in consulting, thank the Lord, but actually in other environments, especially around military folk, is coworkers getting a little too intoxicated, either at maybe a Christmas party or even with a client, and then things get out of hand. And you have a personal story that I'd love you to share. That's it's funny, but at the same time, you're like, WTF, how did this happen?
Ooh. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's definite, and this is a personal preference situation. I am not, I'm not a fan of the drinking. I mean, I'm not a big drinker in general, but drinking with work, to me, some people enjoy it, but it is a slippery slope, because sometimes your clients that you've been working with for multiple years get a little too comfortable, and then before you know it, people are spilling drinks on one another, right? And like that environment just doesn't feel very welcoming, especially for junior people. Doesn't set the right example. Doesn't. And sometimes, I mean, it's distracting from like the professional experience that you're hoping that you're walking away from.
Agree.
So, I mean, I've definitely been, and I've heard this from people on teams that I've worked with, coworkers. I've seen it from clients. I mean, not showing up to meetings the next day because you've been inebriated, right? And maybe you are the support on the project team, and your lead doesn't show up the next day because there were drinks involved. Sometimes the client point of contact doesn't show up because who knows what happened, right? I will tell you that I have always been the individual that just excuses themselves, right? Like, I'll go to dinner, right?
Yep.
But if there's a after dinner situation where there is a bar, whatever, goodbye, guys. I will see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. or whatever time we're starting our meetings. And I excuse myself from the situation. I think it's a bar that I feel most comfortable with. And I think that an aspect of that too was being in this space as a woman and fairly young. Often you're not really traveling with other women. And it's a comfort level. I think that this, and I hate to sound like that, like that it can be a double standard, but sometimes like the buddy situation happens like with your male counterparts, like drinking with clients and things like that, right? And they're talking sports or whatever. Not that, not that we don't want to partake in those conversations, but we don't want to get that to that level of rowdy. And at the end of the day, I also want to wake up and be fresh the next day and be sharp. And I want to like crush the meetings, and I want to make the most out of it. And the last thing that I want to do is be feeling, kind of cruddy, or even getting in my head and second guessing, like, how I was acting, or, was I too giggly, or, you just get in your head about things too. And so I just feel like it's just better not to engage in those types of situations. At least that's been my experience, and something that, like, I've been pretty firm on, my entire professional career.
I think you had such a better head on your shoulders as you went into your career, from the start than I did. I feel like
the risk-based approach.
Yeah. I definitely can speak on the drinking side. Now, I never started fights or did anything that was like entirely inappropriate, but I did start my career in the military, which is a culture of heavy drinking, being inappropriate a lot of times. And I learned as I got into my 30s, I had a business partner that actually used to tell me, you need to go out drinking. That's when real business happens. You need to go out drinking. That's when, like, you're going to really network and do all these things. And it wasn't until I got into my mid to late 30s, like you, I'm like, I started really doing a lot of work on myself, self-reflection, like not drinking so much because it was making me not feel good. And then through all of that, I started to realize that I'm actually not missing out on anything after dinner, and that not going out drinking, I do feel better. And not going out drinking, I'm actually seen as a more professional leader, because women, let's be honest, we have a double standard. And I am seen differently now versus when and I get it. I was younger then. I'm older now. There's all these other factors, but I truly believe a lot of that has shifted, because when I'm with clients, if I drink, it'll be maybe one, maybe two. Like but usually it's one.
Yeah.
That's it. If it's a drink, usually I don't have any, because like you, I want to be super sharp. I want to get into my room by 9 or 10 o'clock. I hate late dinners. Ugh. And I'm not going to go to the drinking event after. And I don't have FOMO, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on business contacts. I'm as successful, if not more successful, by not drinking and by changing who I was in that old pattern of myself. But like, I still catch myself at RSA, for example. Everybody goes out and drinks, but I managed to find all of these networking events that start at like 5, 6, 7 o'clock. And I'll go for about 45 minutes to an hour typically. And then I leave. And you know what? I still meet people. I still network. I don't drink. I get to go home. I'm in bed by 8:30 or 9 o'clock. I don't think I missed out on anything. So if anybody's listening and they're like, oh, but that's where all the stuff happens. No, it's not. That's what people tell you. And yes, do things happen there? Do conversations transpire? Absolutely. But you can have those same impactful conversations at dinner before it gets to that like point of like no return. And we both know when that is. It's around 9 or 10 o'clock after dinner, and everybody's 3 or 4 drinks in. And at that time, I'm like, I'm out. Because I don't want them to see me as the big heavy drinker. I want them to know me as the person that shows up, that is sharp, that is reliable, that has credibility. That's what I want to be seen as. So it all depends on what you want to be seen as. But at the end of the day, if you want to drink, I would just encourage you, have your limits. And if you do if you're somebody that over drinks, people notice that. They may not say anything, but I promise you, people notice that. And that's what I noticed in my prior patterns, is after I've gotten clean and don't drink as much, people notice that, and they'll say stuff to you. They won't say it when you're doing it, but if you shift and change, people will come out and be like, wow, this is a different version of you that I like. So it's just my opinion, my perspective on it. Yeah, I'm with you. And I prefer the not drinking. Yeah. And I really do hate late dinners. Oh, I'm like, why are we having
I know. There's nothing, especially when you're on a time change and you are on West Coast hours, and you're like, oh my God, I'm eating, it's 10 p.m. and they want to do things after this. And I get it. If you are newer to the industry, newer to the team, like the FOMO thing is real. You're like, oh, well, they're going to go and go to this mini golf place, and that sounds fun. And I didn't get to spend as much time with them as I wanted to, or maybe I didn't get to sit with so-and-so, right? Like, I think it goes back to what you said about being intentional about like, what do you like, are there individuals that you wanted to talk to, right? Are there people that you wanted to meet in person? Like if you're at a conference or what have you, like be intentional about meeting up with those that you want to meet up with. Like, listen, happy hour times are great. Half off apps, right? Go get you a dessert, whatever it is that you want to do, like make the time and the space. Maybe it's an early coffee, right? To whatever, like that's an option too. Like you don't have to do the late night situation. I want to be in bed and I want to rest. And if you are in specifically the consulting space, you are also working on multiple projects at once. So you want to check your email at some point, and you may have deliverables due for other clients. And so making it a point and being intentional about being back at your room at a certain time, clear-headed, allows you to knock some of this stuff out, or maybe get an early start to the day the next day, or both. And you're just way better off for it. That is my personal opinion, though. And I know, Jax, you said it. These are our opinions. This entire episode has been very much like what we do and what our experience has been.
Yeah. And I think we could keep talking on this, but I know we're way at time right now. But we would love your guys' feedback on this episode, and let us know what you thought about it. And if you would like us to keep doing similar things like this, such as like sharing our stories, maybe if you all want to submit stories to us, we won't share anybody's name or company name. We would love to kind of like talk through those situations and share with you what we might do in those situations. So please share those with us. You can share those with us at our email at 2, that's the number 2, cyberchicks@gmail.com. And also, this is our last episode for season 5. But don't worry, we are coming back. Stay tuned for season 6, which will be kicking off around February timeframe. More to follow on that. Jerry will be putting that information out for all of you. We can announce, and we are so immensely grateful to our sponsor for season 6, which is Threat Locker. So go check out their website, threatlocker.com. Immensely grateful for sponsoring us yet again for season 6. You guys, next year.
See you next year.
Bye.
Bye.